Treasurer Jim Chalmers says tonight's budget will include policies which should make our economy more resilient to President Trump's tariffs by increasing investment in things like green metals and funding a new Buy Australia campaign. S&P Global Ratings have just done some modelling on the new round of reciprocal tariffs, and its Asia Pacific chief economist Kuijs joins me now. Louis, thanks for your time. How exposed is Australia's economy to the next round of reciprocal tariffs, which could come in on the 2nd of April?
Yeah, so we think that all the APAC economies are going to feel the heat in terms of the economy overall, in the US, in China, slowing down, and that will affect all of us. But some are much more exposed to direct tariffs because the Trump team sees them as having large surpluses with the US, goods surpluses, goods trade surpluses, or having high tariffs on imports from the US. And in Australia, that's not really the case. So we think that in Australia, we're not likely to see very high tariffs being imposed on the country.
Yeah, obviously the federal budget's being handed down tonight. Our economy very reliant on China buying our iron ore. How exposed then is China to the Trump administration's tariffs, and what might that mean for us here?
Yeah, so China has already had 2 rounds, right? So in fact, the average Chinese exports to the US already has a 35% tariff. So they're already quite exposed, already in the bag, and there may be more tariffs to come. And so we are looking at, what does the Chinese government do to its own economy? Are they propping up the economy? And they're actually doing that. So that domestic prop-up is helping a bit dampen the impact of those tariffs when we look at growth of the overall economy in China.
Yeah, we've seen some stimulus measures already from the Chinese government, but are you expecting a few more over the coming months?
We do, because they've been quite ambitious in their growth target and also in terms of what they told us about their fiscal targets, how much money they want to spend on the fiscal side. And so that suggests that there will be more coming in terms of measures. And I actually think that we will see more coming after that, especially on the consumer side, because what has been offered so far is still a little bit modest, especially on the consumption side.
One issue the government may try to address in tonight's federal budget is weak productivity growth in Australia and falling living standards. But how does Australia compare on these measures to the likes of the US and other similar economies?
Yeah, I think if you look at Australia's economy, then in many ways it compares pretty favourable in terms of the outlook to its peer countries, other rich countries. Unfortunately, on the productivity front, it's really the US that is powering along and leaves everybody else in the dust. And so Australia is in the same group as Europe, kind of struggling on the productivity front. And it's not easy to turn that around.
Australia's Reserve Bank cut interest rates last month. The next cash rate decision is exactly 7 days from now. Are you expecting the RBA to cut rates again at some point this year?
We do think there is probably room for, another rate cut this year. It will not be as generous as, people would like, in the sense that we think that because of this very stubborn inflation, the RBA will be quite cautious as it is looking at how much to bring down rates. So we think that there will be some more cuts next year, but probably this year it's going to be a bit modest.
Now, your report also talks about the other big economies across Asia, and it basically suggests that when they do well, Australia's economy benefits. Just explain a bit about that.
Well, Australia has been lucky, right, in the sense that it is located in a part of the world that is that is still growing pretty healthily. Everybody globally is facing downward pressures, but Asia is still by far the fastest growing part of the world. And, we have a lot of countries very keen to continue to grow. If you look at India, Vietnam, the Philippines. And so, when we look at emerging markets around the world, the fastest growing ones are all in Asia. And that will, I walk around here in Melbourne and Sydney, and I see how that benefits the Australian economy, not just in terms of commodity export, but also tourism, education, all these types of services exports, right?
So Kuijs, I'm sorry.
to be a plus.
Thank you. We've run out of time. Thanks for coming on the show.